remember the exact second the world changed. It was 6:47 a.m. on a winter morning when the sun failed to rise. People speak of silence. But they have never known the silence of a sky that refuses to open its eyes. A silence so heavy it presses on the bones. So unnatural it steals the breath from your lungs. It was the kind of silence that tells you something has gone terribly wrong, even before you know why. I was standing at my window, a cup of tea tightening between my palms, watching the horizon where the first light should have broken through. But the darkness stayed. It stretched across the fields like a bruise, like grief waiting to be named. That was the morning I learned that life can shatter without sound. One moment, everything is familiar. The softness of warm steam against the glass. The slow pulse of the kettle cooling on the stove. The steady heartbeat inside your chest. And in the next moment, the world holds its breath. And everything you love begins to slip away. People later said it was a storm. A natural event. A scientific oddity. But I know better. The sky simply forgot to wake. Because the person who once filled my world with light took their last breath in the darkness. Grief has a way of pulling all the colors from the world, leaving only shades of midnight behind. And that morning, as I stood alone in that endless night, I understood something I had never understood before. Life is not measured in time. It is measured in moments that change you forever. Moments when the world breaks. And you must choose whether to break with it, or stand up and begin again. That morning was my moment. The moment my story truly began. The moment I realized that survival is not a decision. It is a promise you make to the ones you lose. I did not know then how much I would have to learn. How long the darkness would last. How deep love can bury itself inside a heart and still find a way to bloom again. But I know now. And I am ready to tell it all. So listen closely. Not to my words, but to the quiet between them. That is where the truth lives that I did not cry when the news came. It is strange, the things grief does to the human heart. Some people break like glass, shattering loud and sudden. Others collapse silently inward, like a star imploding into itself, turning into something unrecognizable. I was the second kind. I sat in the same wooden chair by the window, hands resting motionless on the blanket across my lap, listening to the sound of nothing. Even clocks seemed afraid to tick, as if time itself refused to move forward. People think grief is loud, screaming, sobbing, begging the heavens for mercy. But the real grief is quiet. It is a slow drowning. A silent earthquake. A weight you carry inside your ribs, until it becomes part of your spine. They told me she was gone. Just 3 words. 3 words that tore a hole through the world. She is gone. I remember the way the air changed. How it thickened. How it felt suddenly too heavy to breathe. As if the sky itself leaned down and pressed its cold hand against my chest. I did not speak. There were no words left in me. There was only the sound of my heartbeat. Slow and uneven. Like footsteps pacing inside an empty hallway. The darkness outside the window did not move. Not even the birds dared search for morning. The earth remained trapped beneath a suffocating veil. As if the sun was grieving too. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time is a strange creature when pain takes hold. It stretches and collapses. Loses shape, loses meaning. I remember lifting my hand and touching the window glass. It was ice against my skin. So cold it stung. I watched my breath form small clouds on the surface, as though even my lungs were trying to escape the inside of me. And then, for the first time in my long life, I heard the darkness speak. Not in words, but in a feeling. A quiet whisper from somewhere deep within. You are not done. I don't know why those words came. I don't know why they felt truer than anything I had ever known. But they rooted themselves in the hollow space behind my ribs. In the place where she once lived. In the space where love still burns. And in that moment, something inside me refused to collapse. Something ancient. Something stubborn. Something alive. The darkness had taken everything. But not me. I understood then. That grief is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of the chapter. Where we learn what it means to carry love. Without the hands that once held ours. So I sat with the silence. And I breathed. Slowly. Deeply. Like someone learning for the first time. How to stay alive. This is the part where most stories would offer miracles. Bright light. Hope that arrives like sunrise bursting across the sky. But real life is quieter than that. Hope does not come all at once. It comes in fragments. A heartbeat. A breath. A memory that refuses to fade. And that night, in a world still swallowed by darkness, I felt the first fragile thread of hope pull itself through the cracks inside me. Not enough to stand. Not enough to speak. But enough to keep breathing. And sometimes, that is where survival begins. Grief has a strange way of guiding the mind. When the present becomes unbearable, the heart flees to the past. To the places where the air was warmer. Where laughter still lived. Where love still had a face. And so, as I sat in that endless night, wrapped in a silence that felt heavier than stone, a memory rose within me. With the gentleness of a tide returning to shore. A memory of the first day I met her. It was many years ago. Long before the world began to unravel. Back when the future still felt wide and bright. When time still felt generous. The morning smelled of rain and river wind. The ground was soft with new spring mud. And the trees trembled with the quiet stirring of birds. Testing their wings after a long winter sleep. I was walking along the river path. A narrow trail that curved through the fields like a silver thread. When I saw her for the first time. She was standing barefoot in the shallow water. Ankles painted with sunlight. The hem of her dress floating around her like a poem made of silk. Her hair danced wild in the breeze. And she held her hands out to feel the rain. As if she were welcoming the sky itself. There are moments in life. When something inside you shifts. Before you even understand why. Moments that feel like destiny breathing against your skin. That was mine. The world around her glowed. In a way I had never seen before. Even the river seemed to soften its voice. Its surface reflecting her like a quiet secret. I remember thinking. I know this soul. Though I had never seen her face. My heart recognized her. The way a bird recognizes its way home. Some say love begins with lightning. With a sudden strike that splits the world open. But ours did not begin with thunder. It began with stillness. With a softness so gentle. That I did not realize it had changed me. Until years later. Standing in the ruins of what life had become. From that day forward. She moved through my world. Like dawn moves through darkness. Slow and unstoppable. Painting everything with light. She became the laughter that lived in every corner of the house. The warmth that lingered in every cup of morning tea. The music that hummed beneath every quiet evening. And I became someone I never thought I could be. Someone unafraid of the future. Someone who believed that even the hardest winters must eventually surrender to spring. She was the sun in my sky. And when she left this world, the sun followed her into the grave. That is why the morning never came. That is why the sky stayed dark. Because when a great love ends, the world forgets how to turn. People tell me that grief fades with time. They are wrong. Love does not disappear. Just because the body that carried it becomes dust. Love stands guard in every memory, every echo, every heartbeat. And on the morning when the sky forgot to wake, love was all I had left. It held me upright. It kept my lungs moving. It whispered, "Live." For her. And so I did. Not because I was strong, but because love demanded it. There are dates the mind forgets. And there are dates that carve themselves into the bones, etched so deeply that even time cannot erode them. The night she died is one I carry like a stone in my chest. Heavy, cold, unmovable. It was late winter. The kind of night when the wind screams against the windows, and the world outside feels like it is fighting for breath. The air smelled of snow and iron, and the moon hung low and bruised, struggling to push through a sky swollen with clouds. She had been ill for weeks, her strength thinning like a thread fraying beneath constant strain. But she still smiled. A soft, stubborn smile. As if she could convince the universe to give her just a little more time. But time is deaf to the begging of the human heart. That night, her breathing grew faint, as though each breath was a battle she could no longer win. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the machine that tried to hold her here. A fragile, artificial heartbeat, fighting against the inevitable. I sat beside her, my hand resting over hers, feeling the warmth fade slowly, like a candle burning to its final ember. She looked at me once. Not with fear, not with pain, but with a tenderness so fierce that it tore something open inside me. Her eyes held a storm of unspoken words, and in their depth rested a secret, one she never had the breath to speak. I felt her fingers squeeze mine. A last conversation made of skin and silence. And then, the machine gave a long, flat tone. A sound so merciless. It felt like the sky splitting in two. The world stopped. Air collapsed from my lungs. The universe shrank to a single point of agony. Sharp and endless. Her hand slipped from mine, light as a feather falling from a wing. And suddenly I was holding nothing. Nothing but the ghost of warmth. That vanished too quickly. I don't remember standing. I don't remember crying. I don't remember anything, except the unbearable emptiness that expanded inside me, until I could not feel my own heartbeat. When I stepped outside into the night, the world had already begun to change. The wind died. The snow stilled midair. The clouds stopped moving. And the sky turned black. It was as if every star had been extinguished. As if the sun itself refused to rise, in mourning for the light that had left the earth. That was the night. The sky forgot to wake. But what I did not know was that she left something behind. Something buried between the last beat of her heart and the silence that followed. A secret that would change everything. For weeks after her passing, the world remained trapped under that unbroken darkness. Days and nights bled into one another, indistinguishable, as if time itself had folded inward and lost its way. People tried to explain it. Scientists with trembling voices, leaders with scripted reassurances, news channels flickering like dying candles. They spoke of atmospheric interference, solar anomalies, rare cosmic phenomena. But I knew the truth long before they did. The sky was mourning. And somewhere deep inside me, a single thread of instinct whispered that the darkness was connected to whatever she had not been able to say. I spent my days in silence, moving slowly through the rooms she once filled with warmth, Every object carried her fingerprints. The scarf draped over the back of the chair. The half-read book resting beside the lamp. The porcelain cup on the kitchen counter. Still stained faintly with tea. She would never finish. Grief has a way of turning the smallest things into unbearable monuments. One evening, when the silence grew too heavy to bear, I opened the drawer of her bedside table. The place she guarded most carefully. The place she never allowed anyone to touch. Inside, wrapped in a piece of faded linen, lay an envelope. My hands trembled as I lifted it into the dim light. The paper was soft, almost fragile, as though time had thinned it from the edges inward. And on the front, written in her careful, delicate handwriting, was my name. Seeing it nearly broke me. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. And the ache inside my ribs sharpened. Like a blade turned slowly. I held that envelope for a long time. Unable to open it. Unable to let it go. Some truths feel too heavy to face. Some words feel too alive. Too close to the pulse of the heart. But eventually, with hands unsteady and breath unsteady, I slipped my thumb beneath the seal. And opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Folded twice with precise care. As if she knew that one day, these folds would be opened. By hands shaking from loss. I unfolded it slowly. Her handwriting flowed across the page. Like the sound of her voice. Echoing from somewhere far beyond the reach of breath. The first line stole the air from my lungs. If you are reading this, love, it means I am already gone. My heart clawed against my chest. I pressed the paper to my face. Inhaling the faint trace of her perfume. Still clinging to the fibers. I read the words again. Unable to move past them. And then the next lines. Unraveled everything I thought I understood. There is something you must know. Something I could never speak aloud. The darkness is not the end. It is the beginning. And when the time comes, you will understand why the sky refused to wake. My breath faltered. The room seemed to tilt. The walls closing in. What did she mean? What was beginning? What did she know? That the rest of the world did not? And then, at the very bottom of the page, written smaller, as if meant only for my heart. Find the light they cannot see. As my eyes traced those final words. As my eyes traced those final words. A sudden sound shattered the silence. A soft, distant hum. Like electricity stirring after a long sleep. Like a heartbeat returning. The darkness outside the window quivered. Not breaking. Not lifting. But shifting slightly. As if something unseen had awakened within it. And in that moment, for the first time since she left, I felt something inside me ignite. Something fierce. Something determined. Something alive. Hope is a fragile thing. It does not arrive like thunder or flame. It comes quietly. A tremor beneath the ribs. A soft pulse against the dark. When I heard that humming sound, my heart lurched as if waking from a deep sleep. The air in the room shifted. Not warmer, not brighter. But different. Charged. As though the darkness itself had begun to breathe. I stood slowly. My hand gripping the edge of the table. To steady the tremor in my bones. The envelope still lay open. Her handwriting glowing faintly. In the dim light of the lamp. Find the light they cannot see. The words moved through me like a current. Searching every corner of my mind. For meaning. What light? Where? Why only me? The hum grew stronger. Vibrating through the floorboards. As though something alive moved beneath the earth. I stepped toward the window. The glass was cold against my palms. Frost collecting in delicate patterns. Like white veins branching across a dark surface. Outside, the world was still soaked in blackness. The sky heavy. The earth silent. The horizon swallowed whole. But then, in the distance, far beyond the fields, far beyond the empty road, that once led to the town now abandoned. A flicker. Small. Weak. Barely more than the breath of a candle. And yet my heart recognized it instantly. The same way it had recognized her all those years ago. Standing in the river light. My breath caught that no one else would have seen it. It was too faint. Too disguised by the thick velvet of the eternal night. But I saw it. Perhaps because she had told me how. Perhaps because love leaves its mark. On the eyes that have learned how to look. The flicker vanished just as quickly as it appeared. Leaving a hollow ache of urgency behind. The humming stopped. Silence returned. But not the heavy silence of grief. This silence was waiting. Expectant. Alive. I turned back to the letter. Reading the final lines again. Feeling them burn deeper into my bones. Do not be afraid of the dark. It is only the doorway. A doorway. Not an ending. An entrance. And suddenly, I knew with absolute clarity that the world had not fallen asleep. It was holding its breath. Waiting. For me. My hands trembled as I folded the letter. Pressing it to my chest. As though I could absorb her strength from the ink she left behind. I felt it then. Not around me. But inside me. A spark that had been sleeping beneath the weight of despair. The darkness had taken the sun. Had taken her. Had taken everything that once held the world together. But it had not taken the light she left in me. And that was enough. I reached for my coat. My fingers stiff and uncertain. For it had been weeks since I had touched the outside world. The doorknob was cold. Its metal biting against my skin. But I turned it. I stepped into the darkness. The air hit me like a wave. Sharp, freezing. But real. The silence stretched out around me like an endless ocean. But I was no longer drowning in it. I felt the pull. Gentle but certain. Leading me toward the place where the flicker had appeared. I began to walk. Slowly at first. Then with growing purpose. For the first time since the sky forgot to wake. I felt alive. And somewhere deep inside the darkness. Something was waiting for me. Something that would change everything. The road beneath my feet felt unfamiliar. Though I had walked it 1,000 times before. Grief reshapes the world. Turning every step into foreign ground. Every shadow into a mirror of what has been lost. My boots sank into the damp earth. Each footprint swallowed quickly. As if the darkness wished to erase every trace of movement. The air was sharp inside my lungs. Filling me with the strange sensation. That I was breathing in the night itself. No moon. No stars. Not even the faint softness. That usually lies between one breath and the next. Just blackness. Stretching endlessly in every direction. But still. I walked. Because something inside me was moving forward. Even when my body wanted to collapse. Because her words pulsed through me. Like a hidden heartbeat. Find the light they cannot see. The flicker returned, just for a moment. Far beyond the frozen fields. A fragile pulse of brightness. Like a distant lantern swinging in an invisible hand. It called to me. Not with sound. Not with sight. But with something deeper. A pull beneath the skin. A stirring in the marrow. The path narrowed. Curling along the edge of the river. Where the water once danced silver beneath the morning sun. Now, it moved thick and silent. A black mirror swallowing all reflection. I stopped for a moment, listening to the hush of the world. And in that stillness, I felt something unexpected. A presence. Not beside me. Not behind me. Inside me. As though she walked with me. Step for step. Breath for breath. The wind rose. Soft at first. Then stronger. Curling through the reeds by the riverbank. With a low, trembling hum. Not the hum of machines. Not the hum of storms. The hum of voices. Distant and layered. As if carried from 1,000 miles away. Through tunnels of time. I closed my eyes. The sound sharpened. Became distinct. Took shape. Whispers. Hundreds of whispers. Threading together into something like song. A chorus of lost breath. Not language. Not words. But emotion. Sorrow. Hope. Longing. For a heartbeat. The darkness around me rippled. As though something beneath the surface was trying to rise. And then I saw it. Not with the eyes in my head, but with the ones inside my heart. The flicker stretched upward, unfurling into a thin pillar of pale light. Far across the river valley. Like a blade of dawn piercing the black. My chest tightened. My breath stilled. This was no illusion. This was the light. Small. But alive. The sky around it trembled. As if fighting to break. And beneath the wind. Beneath the whispering voices. I heard one sound. Clearer than all the rest. Her voice. Not in words. In presence. In warmth. Like sunlight resting against skin. Guiding me. I stepped forward. The earth quaked beneath my feet. A shiver rolling through the ground. As though the world itself recognized. That something long forgotten. Was waking. I understood then. In a way deeper than thought. This light was not meant for everyone. It was meant for those who had learned to survive the dark. Those who had walked through grief. And still chosen to move forward. Those who carried love. Like a lantern inside the ribs. Only they could see it. And that meant I was not alone. Somewhere out there. Others were walking too. Others had lost what could never be replaced. Others were fighting to breathe. In a world that had stopped breathing. The light pulsed once more. Brighter this time. As if sensing I was coming. And I knew. With a certainty that burned like flame. This was only the beginning. The darkness was not a tomb. It was an awakening. And the secret she left behind was bigger than my grief. Bigger than death. Bigger than the sky. The first step into the light was like inhaling fire and water at once. My lungs burned with cold air. My skin tingled as though remembering sunlight it had never known. The darkness lingered at the edges. But it no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a shadow of memory. Something to acknowledge. But not to fear. The path widened as I moved closer to the pale pillar. I saw it clearly, a valley carved out of light itself. Not bright. Not blinding. But luminous. Alive with subtle glimmers that danced over every surface. As though the earth itself were breathing. And there, scattered across the valley, figures emerged from the faint haze. Some hunched. Some tall. Some delicate as whispers. All moving slowly, carefully. But all moving forward. They did not speak. They did not wave. They simply existed in the glow. And their presence was enough. For the first time in what felt like forever, I realized the weight I had carried. The loneliness, the fear, the grief. had not been mine alone. We were many. All walking through the dark. All searching for the same fragile glimmer. A figure stepped closer. Not running, not hesitant, just walking. And as they drew near, I recognized her. Not fully, not in the way I remembered. But in essence. The light she carried. The guidance she left behind. Her eyes held the same calm fire. That had pushed me forward through endless blackness. You found it, she said, not with words. But with a weight in the air. That pressed against my chest in recognition. I felt my knees weaken. I wanted to fall. To collapse into the brilliance and let it hold me. But the valley whispered another truth. To survive here, we could not surrender. We had to continue walking. I moved forward. And with each step, the valley shifted. The light bent. Revealing paths I had never imagined. Narrow bridges over streams of silver. Floating stones glimmering like frozen stars. Trees whose branches glowed faintly. Casting soft patterns across the ground. I understood then. This valley was alive. It remembered grief. It remembered pain. But it also remembered hope. And hope could not exist without the living. Without those brave enough to walk into the unknown. I walked. Feeling every past sorrow loosen its grip. Every regret dissolve into the river mist. And as I walked, I heard the whispers again. But this time, they were clearer. Less like a chorus of ghosts. More like songs of survival, of continuity. Somewhere ahead. The light flared brighter. Like the heartbeat of the valley itself. And I realized, with a clarity that almost made me weep. The journey through darkness was never about reaching the end. It was about discovering the light that lives inside us. Even when the world cannot see it. And now, I was ready. To step fully into that light. Because for the first time, I knew, the night could no longer claim me that I stepped into the center of the valley, where the light pooled like liquid silver. All around me, figures paused. They did not speak, yet I felt their recognition. The acknowledgement of shared struggle, shared survival. The figure I had seen before, the one whose essence guided me, reached out her hand. But it was not to pull me forward. It was to remind me, the valley was not an end, but a passage. You carry it now, she seemed to say. The light is no longer just here. It lives in you. I closed my eyes. The memories of darkness, of fear, of endless wandering. All rose like tides inside me. And then, slowly, the valley absorbed them. Not erased, not forgotten. But transformed. For the first time, I felt peace. A fragile, trembling peace, like the first warm breeze of spring. I turned to look back at the path I had walked. The river shimmered under the soft glow. And the shadows of trees stretched like memories across the ground. I could feel the lives I had touched, the souls I had passed. All lingering, waiting for their own courage to carry them forward, and then I saw it, a faint opening at the far edge of the valley. Where the light seemed to meet the horizon. I knew that beyond it lay the world I had left behind. The world that had seemed cold, lonely, and unyielding. But now, I was not the same. I took a deep breath, feeling the light pulse through me. Every step forward was heavy with the weight of memory. But lighter with the gift of hope. And as I stepped into the world beyond the valley, the last whisper of the shadows followed me. Not to haunt, but to remind. Even in darkness, we carry the seeds of light. I walked forward. Into the dawn that stretched wide and forgiving. And though the valley behind me would remain a secret, its light would never leave my heart. Because the night may have shaped me. But the day I chose to walk into, would define me. And that, finally, was enough.